Hello everybody, and welcome to this, my final video blog here from Strasbourg for this parliamentary session. That's really quite momentous for me. That means I've now completed 5 years as your MEP. Doesn't seem that long. It seems like 5 minutes, but it's been a very enjoyable time. I've learned a lot, and I feel that I'm ready to do another 5 years, fully equipped and ready to hit the ground running. So let me just tell you a little bit about what's happening here. It's a little bit of a mop-up session this last 3 days here in Strasbourg voting, because obviously there's an awful lot of things which haven't got through up to now, and they want to get the votes through this week. Nothing sinister about that, it's just simply that the processes take a long time. Nothing's been pushed in at the end that we didn't know about. It's all stuff that we've been working on. A couple of things I've been working on that I think you'll be interested in. The first one is some work on the fishing fund, which has its final vote today, and I've spoken to you about that before. This will be supporting our fishermen in making sure that they can work with the discard ban. Secondly, we've got a vote on honey, which again I've talked to you about before, but the final vote is this week, so that's very exciting for me. We've had a vote yesterday on something called official controls, which probably means nothing to you, but what it is it's extremely important. It's around all of the food chain legislation. So we had our horse meat scandal last year. We've looked at what we can do to tighten up, to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And across this legislation, there's been calls particularly from the left of the Parliament, for much stricter controls from Europe, for charging of operators in the food chain. So mandatory charging, that means that every single person would have to pay towards the costs of inspection. Now, that on the face of it doesn't seem like such a bad idea, but when you drill down to the detail, what that would mean is that an abattoir in Bulgaria, for example, would be paying fees at the same sort of rate as an abattoir in Germany. And we all know the costs are completely different, and indeed the way that the government looks at and inspects these processes is different. And I, for one, don't see any value in having that all uniform, and I certainly see no value in having a European, what would effectively be a tax on the food industry. So I've been working very hard to get that part of the legislation removed, and yesterday we voted on an amendment that I put through, which would say that member states may do that, may charge if they wish to. Indeed, the UK government charges in some areas of the food chain, but they are not compelled to do so by Europe. And I'm delighted to tell you that for once common sense prevailed, and that got through. So we now have a very different piece of legislation coming through. It's not finalised yet, but I think it's a good illustration of how Europe works. And sometimes when you fight back and you look for allies, you can actually make sure that common sense prevails. So that's been an interesting one. And finally, I'll just talk a little bit about something called the invasive alien species legislation, which I've been working on for the last 2 years. It sounds awful, doesn't it? It sounds like men landing from space, but it's not. It covers plants and animals which are not native to Europe and which are invasive. And I think the one we know best, particularly in the southwest, is the Japanese knotweed. Well, this particular piece of legislation means that not only does the member state have a duty to deal with eradication of invasive species, but there is cooperation between the member states under a legislative framework to do that. Now, in this case, I think that's a good idea, because particularly in continental Europe, borders are not respected by seeds or by animals. They cross them daily. So it's important that we have a system where member states work together. Very many people have written to me concerned about ornamental invasive species, and I think it's important I tell you that there is a difference between invasive and alien. We have many alien species in all of our gardens. So many of the plants that we have that were collected by those fantastic Victorian collectors are not covered by this legislation at all, because they're not out colonising the countryside. But where they do, a good example of that is the rhododendron Picota, I think it is, Piconum, that has done that, and as you know, vast swathes of those have been removed from Cornwall and Devon to try and stop their movement. But there's no need to get worried about inspectors coming into your gardens, as some of the press have said. That's not going to happen. The inspectors, if there ever are any, and I doubt there will be, would be UK government inspectors, because it would be entirely up to the UK government how they police it. And at the moment, the fact that most of our rhododendrons are drafted onto that stock, grafted onto that stock is not going to be an issue. So I'll be sending out a letter, and there'll be something on my website about the outcome of that vote later on this week, so I would ask you to look at it. So can I just say thank you to you all for being such an attentive audience. I've had some lovely emails and comments about this blog. I've really enjoyed doing it. I'm looking forward to the elections on the 22nd of May, when I hope you'll all go out and put your cross in the Conservative box. So I would certainly like to be back here working for you for another 5 years. I look forward to that and meeting many of you on the campaign trail as I go round over the next 6 weeks. Thank you.